robber disguised himself as a painter and boldly walked into the bank. With a calm expression, he put down his backpack. Then, using a modified floodlight emitting infrared rays, he silently disabled the bank's surveillance system. Shortly afterward, 3 of the robber's accomplices hurried into the bank. They were also disguised as painters, carrying large bags of equipment as they filed in one by one. Next, they quickly locked the door from the inside. At that moment, the bank security guard noticed something unusual. However, before he could react, a cold handgun was pressed against the small of his back. The robber immediately threw 2 smoke grenades, warning everyone to lie on the ground or face the bullets. Caught off guard by the robber's sudden attack, everyone in the bank was easily subdued without a struggle. However, the smoke from the grenades started spreading outside the bank. Coincidentally, a patrolling police officer happened to pass by and keenly noticed the unusual situation. The officer's heart skipped a beat, and he was about to report the emergency to headquarters. But before he could act, a robber suddenly rushed out, pointed a gun at his head, and fiercely warned him not to make any sudden moves. The robber added that they had hostages in their hands. What happened next was even more unexpected. Instead of hastily grabbing the money, the robbers herded all the hostages into the basement. Then, they confiscated everyone's phones and personal belongings. What followed was even more baffling. The robbers ordered everyone to line up in 2 rows, separated by gender. Then, with menacing expressions, they demanded that everyone strip down to their undergarments, leaving only their intimate clothing. Although the hostages were deeply unwilling, they dared not resist under the robbers' threats and had no choice but to comply. What happened next was even stranger. The robbers produced a set of identical uniforms, distributing them one by one and forcing everyone to put them on. This series of bizarre actions was unlike anything anyone had ever heard of or seen before. It seemed that a grand and mysterious conspiracy was lurking behind the robbers' actions. Meanwhile, the police were alerted to the situation and swiftly mobilized. In no time, heavily armed SWAT teams gathered, surrounding the bank with an airtight perimeter. Detective Frazier, who was leading the case, rushed to the scene with a sense of urgency, determined to negotiate with the robbers. When the bank's chairman, Case, learned that Branch 32 had been taken hostage, it felt like a bolt from the blue, because hidden within that bank was a secret he could never let see the light of day. If exposed, it would plunge him into irreversible ruin. Yet, the robbers' behavior was bafflingly unusual. They showed no interest in the vault full of cash. Instead, they turned their attention to a safe deposit box, which seemed to be their true target. Case, realizing what the robbers were after, became increasingly terrified. He feared that his secret would be exposed to the world. In a panic, he quickly arranged to meet the resourceful White, hoping she could help him deal with this crisis. When they met, Case lied, claiming that the contents of the safe were his family heirlooms and that he could not allow anyone to see them under any circumstances. He asked White to use her extensive connections to retrieve the contents of the safe before the police could. For White, as long as the price was right, no task was out of the question. Meanwhile, the robbers were far from idle, executing their plan with precision and urgency. The police, on the other hand, were racing against time to find clues. They reviewed surveillance footage from the time of the bank takeover and discovered that the robbers' methods were exceptionally sophisticated. Using invisible infrared rays, they had silently disabled the bank's security system. However, it was precisely the 2-minute gap in surveillance footage that left the police completely in the dark about who had entered or exited the bank. This became the key factor in the robbers' ultimate success in escaping. Soon after, there was finally a new development at the bank. The robbers suddenly released a hostage, but this left the police in a difficult position, unable to determine whether this person was an ally or a foe. The hostage was wrapped tightly, with a mysterious box strapped to their chest, which startled the SWAT team immensely. Their first instinct was to assume it was a bomb. However, when they cautiously opened the box, they discovered an astonishing message from the robbers. The robbers demanded that the police prepare 2 fully fueled buses, a passenger plane on a runway filled with fuel, and pilots to operate them. All of this had to be arranged by 9 p.m., or they would execute 1 hostage every hour. Additionally, the robbers warned the police not to act rashly, as they had already planted plastic explosives inside the bank. The robbers' demands were absurd, and Frazier clearly had no intention of agreeing to such unreasonable conditions. However, figuring out how to rescue the hostages and defuse the crisis became an extremely challenging problem for him. Meanwhile, White had already started taking action. Confident as ever, she approached the mayor. Using incriminating evidence she had against him, she forced the mayor to agree to let her participate in handling the bank situation. The mayor, left with no choice, brought White to the scene. He informed Frazier that White would assist him in managing the case. To Frazier, allowing an outsider to meddle in police affairs was clearly against regulations. What he didn't expect was that White would blackmail him over an incident involving a missing $140,000 check. She even threatened to ruin his career if he didn't cooperate. Under pressure from the mayor, Frazier reluctantly agreed to let her assist, at least temporarily. In reality, the missing check incident was entirely fabricated and intentional accusation by a drug dealer seeking to reduce their own sentence. Around lunchtime, the robbers emerged from the bank with a hostage in tow, making a new demand for 50 pizzas to be delivered. This seemingly trivial request presented a glimmer of hope, and Frazier seized on the opportunity with sharp intuition. He quickly ordered his officers to discreetly plant listening devices inside the pizza boxes, hoping to gain valuable insight into the robbers' every move. However, Frazier never imagined that what seemed like a flawless plan had already been anticipated by the robbers. When the listening devices were activated, the sounds transmitted were completely incomprehensible, like a foreign code. No one present could understand a single word. Frazier furrowed his brow but refused to give up on this hard-earned lead. He had an idea. He played the recording over a loudspeaker, hoping that a passerby might recognize the language. To his surprise, a construction worker stepped forward, confidently identifying it as Albanian. However, he admitted he didn't speak the language himself. His ex-wife was Albanian. Frazier quickly urged the man to call his ex-wife. Not long after, a strikingly elegant and alluring woman arrived. Hearing the situation explained, she agreed to help, but on one condition: she wanted all her parking tickets in the bag she carried to be dismissed. Eager to decode the recording, Frazier agreed without hesitation. When the woman listened to the recording through the loudspeaker, she suddenly burst out laughing. She revealed the truth. The recording was an excerpt from a speech by a former Albanian president, something she had heard daily during her school years. This revelation was a thunderbolt for Frazier, leaving him both shocked and exasperated. He finally realized that the robbers had been aware of their bugging plan all along. They had intentionally planted this recording to mock the police and waste their time. Just as Frazier suspected, the robbers' purpose was to stall for time while they executed an elaborate master plan. The cunning robbers had divided the hostages into different groups, frequently moving them between rooms. Each time a transfer occurred, the robbers would insert one of their own disguised as a hostage into the group. These infiltrators deliberately removed their masks and incited unrest among the hostages, fostering chaos. When the situation seemed on the verge of spiraling out of control, the robbers would suddenly appear, violently dragging the supposed troublemaker away and subjecting them to a brutal beating. This tactic not only intimidated the other hostages but also ensured they would vividly remember the disguised accomplice. This meticulously planned strategy was critical to the robbers' eventual successful escape. The robbers' target in this operation was precisely Safe Deposit Box 392, which held Case's darkest secrets. Inside the box was not only a confidential document but also dozens of packets of expensive diamonds, including a priceless Cartier diamond ring. All of these were ill-gotten gains amassed by Case. The robbers now faced a significant challenge: how to escape with the diamonds worth a fortune without getting caught. However, they had meticulously planned every detail. After persistent effort, they managed to dig a half-meter deep hole. This pit would play a crucial role in their plan. Shortly afterward, the leader of the robbers, Russell, called Frazier to inquire about the status of the airplane. Frazier lied, claiming he was doing his best to arrange it, explaining that mobilizing an airplane was no easy task. Unbeknownst to Frazier, this was all part of the robbers' strategy to mislead and distract him. Russell knew perfectly well that the police would never prepare an airplane for them. In truth, this was a ruse designed to throw Frazier off and conceal their real plan. At that moment, Frazier was completely at the mercy of the robbers, unable to find a solution. Meanwhile, White expressed her desire to speak directly with the robbers. Frazier used his phone to call the bank, allowing White to negotiate. White confidently claimed that if Russell could ensure that certain interests remained protected, she had a way to help him get what he wanted. Hearing this, Russell agreed to meet White face-to-face. White entered the bank alone, and the robbers, being extremely cautious, conducted a thorough search of her to ensure she wasn't carrying anything suspicious. Once satisfied, they allowed her to meet Russell. White proposed her terms. If the robbers surrendered immediately, she could guarantee they would only serve 3 to 4 years in prison. Upon release, receive $2 million in compensation. However, Russell was clearly unsatisfied with this offer. He wanted to know what White was so desperately trying to protect. In reality, even White didn't know the full story. Her employer had only instructed her to retrieve a single item from the safe. What she never anticipated was that Russell had already obtained the document in question. As it turned out, during World War II, Case, working for a Swiss bank, had been a morally bankrupt opportunist. He exploited his ties with the Nazis to amass a fortune. Standing by his innocent civilians were stripped of everything. Using this blood money, he later founded the bank and sought to bury the truth through his social status and extensive connections. Russell, however, regretfully informed White that he couldn't hand over the document. It was his trump card. If he were caught, he was certain that Case would spare no effort to help him, as this document was tied to Case's reputation and survival. If Russell could escape unscathed, he could then force Case to pay a hefty sum to buy back the document. No matter the outcome, it was a win-win situation for Russell, a deal with no downside. Meanwhile, Fraser began to sense something strange. The robbers knew full well the police would never provide them with an airplane, yet they stubbornly waited for one. Clearly, there was a hidden and sinister plan at play. Suddenly, Fraser realized that while the police had intended to stall the robbers to buy time, they had instead fallen into the robbers' trap. From beginning to end, it was the robbers who had been deliberately stalling. Recognizing this, Fraser decided to take a different approach, give the robbers exactly what they wanted. Without hesitation, Fraser called the bank and firmly lied, claiming that the airplane was ready. However, he insisted that he first needed to see all the hostages safe and sound. After a moment of contemplation, Russell weighed the pros and cons and agreed to Fraser's request. Fraser then entered the bank alone. Russell accompanied him to the basement, where the hostages, terrified and trembling, looked like frightened birds. Those who had disobeyed the robbers were bound tightly and isolated in a separate room. Fraser suppressed his anger and sorrow, reassuring the hostages with a promise that they would all be rescued. He then tried to discern Russell's true intentions. After all, he had never heard of a bank robber planning to escape with hostages on an airplane, such an absurdly far-fetched idea. As Fraser carefully observed the interior of the bank, he boldly pointed out that Russell was deliberately stalling for time. Russell remained silent, but Fraser refused to back down. He continued to press, trying various ways to provoke Russell into revealing his hand. Just as Fraser was about to leave, he pretended to shake Russell's hand and suddenly lunged at him, attempting to rip off his mask to see his face. In that critical moment, another robber arrived just in time, stopping Fraser's impulsive move. Russell, now thoroughly enraged, warned Fraser that he wasn't bluffing. If the airplane wasn't ready by 9 p.m., he would begin executing hostages. Back at the command vehicle, Fraser confidently told Captain Darius that he had given the robbers at least 100 reasons to shoot him, yet they hadn't. He was convinced the robbers weren't planning to kill anyone and suspected they were plotting something else entirely. Before Fraser could finish speaking, Russell's call suddenly came in like a grim omen. Russell instructed them to use the cameras to check the second window of the bank, promising a surprise. Fraser quickly checked and was stunned to see a live feed of a hostage being executed. The robber's act of killing a hostage had crossed the police's red line. Captain Darius immediately began strategizing a forced assault on the bank. However, they faced a major problem. The bank had only one entrance. If the SWAT team entered in the dark, they would undoubtedly become sitting ducks. Even if they managed to reach the basement, everyone inside was dressed identically, making it impossible to distinguish hostages from robbers. To make matters worse, there was still the possibility that the robbers had planted explosives. No matter how they proceeded, it seemed inevitable that hostages would be harmed. One officer suggested using rubber bullets to aim for the robbers' heads and knock them unconscious. The idea seemed promising. After some deliberation, the team agreed to launch their assault at first light. The next morning, as SWAT prepared for their tense operation, Fraser stepped out of the command vehicle for a breath of fresh air, while chatting casually with another officer.
I'll try much what I say in the future. You never know who's listening.
Something the officer said struck Fraser like a bolt of lightning. He rushed back to the command vehicle, frantically dismantling the message board. Sure enough, hidden inside was a listening device. No wonder the robbers seemed to know their every move. Fraser immediately informed Captain Darius to halt the operation, warning him that it was likely a trap set by the robbers. However, Captain Darius, eager to claim credit for resolving the case, ignored Fraser's warning and pressed ahead with the assault. Hearing a conversation over the listening device, Russell immediately sprang into action. He quickly threw a smoke grenade, and in an instant, the basement was engulfed in thick, rolling smoke. The other three robbers moved in perfect sync, roughly herding all the hostages out of their rooms. Chaos erupted in the basement, turning it into utter mayhem. The robbers ordered everyone to head to the bank's main hall, like a swarm of headless flies. The hostages, driven by fear, frantically rushed toward the staircase. The other 3 robbers seized the opportunity, quickly dropping their weapons and disguising themselves as hostages, blending seamlessly into the panicked crowd. As the sound of an explosion echoed, the SWAT team successfully breached the bank's main door. But just as they were preparing to storm the bank, a massive crowd of hostages suddenly poured out. The SWAT team froze in confusion, unable to distinguish between robbers and innocent civilians. Left with no better option, they fired rubber bullets to incapacitate everyone. As more people emerged from the bank, the SWAT officers swiftly restrained them one by one, tying everyone up with the intention of sorting things out later. With the immediate chaos under control, the SWAT team entered the bank, fully armed and prepared for a fight. They conducted a meticulous search of the premises, turning the bank upside down, but they found nothing, no trace of the robbers, no bombs, no secret passageways, and not a single cent missing from the vault. This baffled the police. Either the robbers had magically disappeared, or they had escaped by blending in with the hostages. To their astonishment, the robbers had only used toy guns during the heist, and even the supposed execution of a hostage had been staged with props. These bizarre actions only deepened the mystery. Frazier decided to interrogate the hostages overnight, which turned out to be a massive headache for the police. After thoroughly questioning each individual, they found that every single person could provide at least 3 witnesses to confirm their status as hostages. This was the brilliance of the robbers' plan. They had deliberately infiltrated the hostages earlier to lay the groundwork for their escape. Moreover, since the police couldn't be sure if the robbers were among the hostages, they easily evaded suspicion. In the end, the police came up empty-handed. To Frazier's disbelief, the police chief instructed him to wrap up the case quickly. Frazier was stunned. This case was full of unanswered questions. Most importantly, not a single robber had been caught. How could they just sweep this under the rug? The chief, equally exasperated, explained that these were orders from higher-ups. He also mentioned that they had found the missing $140,000 check, implying that Frazier's name had been cleared. But Frazier wasn't willing to let it go so easily. He carefully reviewed all records related to the bank's safety deposit boxes and discovered something suspicious. There was no information about Box 392. Realizing there was more to the case, Frazier sought out a judge and applied for a search warrant to investigate the bank's safety deposit boxes. Just as Frazier was about to leave, he ran into White. White advised him to drop the case, warning him to consider whether the case or his career was more important. But Frazier was prepared for her threats. He played a recording of the conversation between himself, White, and the mayor. Realizing she had been cornered, White quickly changed her tone, claiming that if Frazier worked with her, he could rise through the ranks and achieve great success. However, Frazier was only interested in uncovering what Case was hiding. White didn't reveal much, only praising Frazier as a good cop and urging him to let the matter go. Later, White reported back to banker Case, claiming she had promised Frazier a promotion and successfully handled him. Case, however, was most concerned about the confidential documents still in the robber's possession. White reassured him that the robbers might one day use the document to blackmail him into buying it back. Case handed White a massive check, seemingly appeased. But in an unexpected twist, Russell was still hiding inside the bank. The robbers had deliberately stalled for time to construct a hidden compartment in the bank's storage room. The deep pit they dug earlier wasn't part of an escape route. It was meant to store waste. Russell had been hiding behind the compartment the entire time, waiting for the bank to resume normal operations so he could walk out unnoticed with the diamonds. Meanwhile, Russell's 3 accomplices were waiting outside in a car, ready to pick him up at a moment's notice. At this critical juncture, an unexpected situation arose. Frazier and his assistant arrived at the bank without warning. The accomplices quickly alerted Russell to the development. Despite the surprise, Russell remained calm and composed, proceeding methodically with his plan. Carrying a bag full of diamonds, he casually walked out of the basement and into the bank lobby without drawing any attention. At that moment, Frazier hurried into the bank and accidentally bumped into Russell. Unaware of Russell's identity, Frazier didn't think twice and let him walk away. Russell boldly exited the bank in plain sight. When Frazier and his team opened safe deposit box 392, they discovered that Russell had intentionally left the Cartier diamond ring behind. Next to it was a note that read, "Follow the ring." Russell's plan was to lead Frazier toward uncovering more truths and to use them as leverage against Case. Frazier took the Cartier diamond ring to Case's residence, seeking answers about the contents of box 392. Case refused to admit anything, repeatedly claiming he had nothing to say. This only strengthened Frazier's conviction that Case was hiding something sinister. As Frazier left, He raised his middle finger at Case, with the Cartier ring prominently displayed. The gesture wasn't just mockery, it was a thunderous warning. In the end, Frazier handed the recording of his conversation with White and the mayor to both of them, declaring that all he wanted was to be a good cop. As expected, Frazier was promoted to senior detective. That night, as Frazier was getting ready for bed, he reached into his pocket and found something surprising, a diamond. It was then that he realized the man he bumped into earlier that day was Russell. The diamond was Russell's small gift to Frazier, a bold declaration that he had walked out of the bank's front door without a hitch. I'm a movie lover. Please subscribe to my channel and we'll see you next time.